Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another live stream. Tim and Michael, thank you both so much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be on, Deirdre and Michael. Good to see you.
Now we need we need a wide shot of Tim's background because this is definitely the coolest backdrop of the day. I'm sure Michael would agree with me. Tim, just explain to us what is behind you.
Yeah, so I'm here in our rocket producing factory in Long Beach. This is actually a 3D printed rocket section behind me. So Relativity builds the world's largest metal 3D printers. We're actually printing our own rocket launch vehicles to send satellites to orbit. And this is a piece of it that we're launching and assembling towards the end of this year from our launch site at Cape Canaveral in Florida.
That's incredible. And Sheetz, I see you have a surfboard. We won't get into that, but I know you have, rockets and everything as our resident, one of our resident space experts at CNBC. So Tim, big news this morning. Why don't you walk us through it? You guys raised some money, and I'm looking at the list of some of the investors: Mark Cuban, Jared Leto, some of the more predictable names as well, like Fidelity. Talk us through what you're going to use that money for and why you decided to raise now.
Yeah, of course. So today, Relativity announced a new $650 million funding round, which is our Series E funding round, led by Fidelity. So this is a new private capital raise. We also added BlackRock, Co2, Sorabun Capital, Centricus, and had existing investors Bailey Gifford, Bond Capital, which is Mary Meeker's new fund, Mark Cuban, Jared Leto, Y Combinator. So we really do have some of the best investors in the world that have aligned in this vision that Relativity is building. I founded the company 5.5 years ago after starting the metal 3D printing division at Blue Origin, where I was also a propulsion development engineer, with the vision to 3D print an entire rocket. So we're not just 3D printing bits and parts of a rocket. We've actually invented technology in a whole new way of developing, designing, and building rockets where it's 95% 3D printed. So we're going to go from raw material coming in our factory doors to a complete rocket only 60 days later, which compares to about 2 years of what it takes a traditional supply chain to actually build a launch vehicle today. So we really see 3D printing as this whole new tech stack and automation technology that transforms what has been for the last 60 years a fixed tooling based, very high part count, very high manual labor process in building not just rockets, but all aerospace products around the world into an automated software-driven technology, which is really what 3D printing enables.
It's an incredible timeline. Now, I'm so happy, Michael, that we have you. I'm going to call you Sheetz because we're on the live stream. So, and that's what we're used to. So you've been covering this company for a long time. Tell our audience more like where Relativity Space fits. When we talk a lot about billionaires and sending humans to space, where does Relativity fit into the whole ecosystem? Just give us an overview of that.
Yeah, on the space side of things, they fit with the Terran 1 rocket on what's known as the medium lift section of the launch market. So you have your Falcon 9 sized rockets. Those are what are described as heavy lift. That's kind of your top end of the market. And then another company that's been launching rockets to orbit is Rocket Lab. They have their Electron. That's launching 250 kilograms, 300 kilograms. You're talking about satellites the size of mailboxes or small refrigerators. Now, on the relativity piece of all of this, Terran 1 is obviously in the medium lift, right in between there at about 1,200 kilograms to orbit. But now Terran R is this kind of next generation, pushing the boundary to another new level, really taking it up a notch in terms of where they're going to compete at the heavy end of the market, not just on the medium side now.
Right. And Tim, you have said, or actually there was a headline, I don't know that you said this, but taking on SpaceX, and that's no small task. So, if you're competing with Elon Musk, how do you intend to do so? Why is 3D printing sort of a game changer here?
Yeah, of course. So Relativity now has raised over $1.3 billion in equity funding. So we have a huge amount of that capital still outstanding to go build this new rocket, Terran R, which, as Michael said, is a heavy lift launch vehicle. It's fully reusable. So that means all of the sections are reused, and it's also 3D printed. So we're going to be able to build Terran R in 60 days as well. So we're using our same 3D printing approach to actually 3D print this over 200-foot tall, 16-foot diameter launch vehicle that can now launch more than 20,000 kilograms. This is a pretty huge rocket. With Terran 1, we're already the most pre-sold rocket in history before launch. So we actually have a lot of the team that actually helped build the first wave of private space companies over the last 2 decades. And the founding mission and vision that I had with Relativity 5 years ago was that humanity needs to be a multiplanetary species. And I saw SpaceX landing rockets and docking with the International Space Station and doing really inspiring things. But after 13 years of that success, they were still the only company in the world that wanted to make humanity multiplanetary and go to Mars. And I really felt that 3D printing was inevitably required to see that future happen in our lifetime. So some company had to be founded to invent the technology to build an industrial base on Mars. No one had tried yet. And so I founded Relativity with this goal of being the second company that wants to go to Mars and hopefully inspiring dozens to hundreds more to make that happen. So I think having a similar long-term mission is actually important because it's a really big one, and we need a lot of development to make that happen quickly.
That is an ambitious mission. Sheetz, jump in here when we're talking about building colonies on Mars. I'm going to let you field this one. What needs to happen? How far away is that really? But Sheetz, you go ahead.
Yeah, it's a dream that a number of folks have had in the industry. I mean, you can really trace that back pretty distinctly to, you know, Musk's vision for SpaceX back when he started to found the company. Was, you know, he wanted to put effectively a greenhouse on Mars. It was a scientific experiment that he couldn't find a ride to get there, and that's, you know, the genesis of where SpaceX came from. But now you've seen this steady progression where, you know, NASA's been sending rovers to Mars, but if you actually want to build up a sustainable base, you need massive ships, sort of like what Tim and I've talked about in the past, which is, you know, rockets like our ship. But then you also need lots of other smaller rockets to just deliver goods, deliver cargo to Mars. And you also have the problem of this window every 2.5 or so years in which Mars is at its closest orbit to the Earth. So there's also the kind of orbital challenge of, you know, on the timing. So it's going to take several years. You need to get so many different things lined up to get there. And this is the kind of capital you need to get the first step moving towards that goal.
When you say several years, this is a question to both of you. How far away is it, you know, getting to Mars?
Yeah, I certainly think it's closer the more companies are working on it. So I am a huge fan of the Starship program. I think what they're doing is very important to actually launch human beings to Mars, and it's making rapid progress. But the issue is all of the animations that I've seen of Starship landing and right when people walk out, that's right where it fades to black. So certainly there needs to be companies working on the industrial base, and I certainly think that we can send our first payload to Mars in less than 10 years. And then I also think the rate of compounding progress that 3D printing enables really will be a step function change in how quickly the aerospace industry can actually iterate and evolve. Because we're going to be able to build entire rockets in less than 60 days, and then 60 days later do a better version, and 60 days later a better version than that. So it's really going to be unlike anything that anyone has seen in the entire aerospace industry before with what Relativity is pioneering. And of course, now we have way more funding with very long-term mission-focused investors to actually go big and make this happen in an even increasingly accelerated way versus what we've even been able to do over just the last 5 years.
Within 10 years then, Sheetz,
I want to jump in
here among other industry insiders? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to jump in and add the context around when you would see something like this really starting to happen is when you first start to see the number of launches going to low Earth orbit, which, you know, we're already at, you know, breaking records in terms of how many satellites people are setting up, the number of launches that are going up at a time in the now dozens range, as opposed to the, you know, the low tens or even single digit launches. That's going to shift almost to like the 100 launches a year kind of ballpark, but where you start saying, okay, we've really got this kind of low Earth orbit economy going. Let's step farther where where we have the technology, we have the kind of longevity, and we have the price point down to where it's all being kind of this more of a steamroll momentum builder, and actually can, start to reach out. You can send smaller, shorter missions to the moon and then also onto Mars, but you really need something much more kind of solid foundations first. And I think that's the thing that we're going to have to see happen, is when that low Earth orbit economy is kind of more vibrant than it is today.
When you say lower orbit economy, is that sort of orbiting the Earth then, sort of much nearer than we're talking the moon or Mars? And
So
okay,
that's
so then
you're talking the International Space Station, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that then as well, because obviously there's been some headlines over the last few days. Bezos making news that he will be the first billionaire. And then Sheetz and I were talking earlier this morning, Tim, about a report. We don't know how much credibility to give it, that perhaps Richard Branson would try to beat him on July 4th weekend. Sheetz, break that down for us. Do we think it's going to be Bezos? Is there any chance that Branson can go ahead of him?
Based off of Virgin's previous game plan, there's not a scenario where I necessarily see that happening. However, Branson is a very competitive person, and he's demonstrated that throughout his entire career and his many other ventures beyond space. So, hypothetically, I could, it's possible. Whether they'll be technically ready, we'll have to wait and hear and find out. The other key contact there is that that's around suborbital tourism. It certainly has its place in the broader space ecosystem of, getting people to experience space, but those are short rides to the edge of space. You're not going all the way up in orbit, which is a lot more difficult. And so it kind of fits in a smaller, more niche section of the space industry.
And Tim, does it matter who makes it first? I mean, I know you operate in a different space of sending stuff into space, but in terms of this billionaire race, does it matter?
I think maybe it does to some small segment of the general public, but in the long run, no, I really don't think so. I mean, these are, of course, really technically ambitious programs, and I think they will definitely be successful. But we're really at Relativity focused on orbital spaceflight and building a low Earth orbit space economy, like Michael Sheetz referenced. Today, the whole space industry is about $400 billion per year of total revenue across all the different sectors. Launch occupies a small but important slice of that, because it's how everything gets to space. So we're focused on lowering the cost of building rockets, how quickly we can iterate and evolve them. I think those companies are certainly involved in creating a new market for human tourism and suborbital spaceflight, which I think is sexy. I think it's cool. I think it definitely drives attention to the industry. But I think to actually make humanity a multiplanetary species, we need to focus on orbital launch vehicles. And that's really where Blue Origin is building their own orbital launch vehicle with New Glenn. I had the good fortune to work a little bit on that and New Shepard actually before starting Relativity. So I think really what you're seeing is more companies are now being formed out of this first wave of private space pioneers and companies. And I think that's a great thing. That's actually the sign of a market that is evolving and iterating at a higher rate, which is what we want to see. A bunch of startups that are raising capital, making really disruptive new companies.
Yeah, and certainly a bet that the addressable market is expanding quickly. I can actually stay here and talk about this for the next hour easily. Yeah. We do have to get to a show, so I guess
I'm down.
Tim, I know you guys should continue on actually. Tim, my last sort of question for you is, with money pouring into the space and you guys just raising around, we saw Virgin Galactic go public via SPAC. What are you thinking in terms of plans to raise more money, bring more awareness to what you guys are doing away from perhaps that space tourism side that is so sexy and gets a lot of the headlines? Why not look at a SPAC or going public in another way?
Yeah, of course. Well, we actually just raised a $500 million funding round, which is our Series D, only about 7 months ago. So that was led by Tiger Global. And then this round, of course, is $650 million. So in the last 7 months, we've raised over $1.1 billion privately. And it was inbound interest. We've made tons of progress. As I mentioned before, we're actually the most pre-sold rocket company in history before launch with Terran 1. You asked about how we're going to compete against other launch vehicle companies. Well, but part of it is we actually have a team that's built and flown and launched and landed over 10,000 rockets in their prior experience. So over 400 employees now, very, very experienced team. We actually have launch sites at Cape Canaveral, Florida, also one at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We control about a third of NASA Stennis Space Center, where we do all of our engine and vehicle testing. So we have a ton of momentum, and we're finding private capital is actually pretty limitless right now. And so we do have a long-term mission.
Especially when you have Tiger as one of them.
Yeah. No, they're great. And so, yeah, we're very long-term focused on our mission. And of course, this really enables us to continue building. And we've actually sold our first Terran R launch vehicle. So we're also announcing that today. We've actually signed a binding launch contract for this fully reusable rocket that's 20 times larger than the rocket sitting behind me that we're launching at the end of this year. So we're not putting our foot off the gas at all. We're actually accelerating into our long-term plans. And these have actually been our plans for the last 5 years since I founded the company. And we started in Y Combinator as just 2 co-founders, and cold emailed Mark Cuban for our first funding. So we've come a long way since.
By the way, Mark Cuban, is he interested in space tourism as well as getting out there, or more on the side of what you're doing things? Maybe Michael knows the answer to that.
Yeah, I talk to Mark all the time, actually. He's been a huge supporter of us. He's invested in every single funding round. I actually help him with some of his other investments that he makes in other startups. So yeah, I could certainly ask him, and I'm sure some of our investors will want to fly to space, and I'll promise to be their due diligence coach and tell them when I think it's a good time.
Are you gonna fly to space, or are you gonna look for one of those tickets on either Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic?
Yeah, I think my wife's gonna beat me. She's an artist training as an astronaut, and she wants to go to space. So yeah, I think she may beat me to it, but we'll see. I'm certainly open to it.
You buried the lead. Your wife is an aspiring astronaut. What is?
Yeah. We met at USC, and yeah, she's an artist professionally. But we connect on a lot of different levels, and yeah, I'm proud of her for doing what she's doing.
That's very cool. Okay, I think this is our longest live stream yet. I gotta go do the show, but it was really fascinating. We could continue to go on. Tim, I hope we'll have you back, and Michael, as always, hope to have you as involved as you can be. Thank you so much, and keep us posted. Excited to see what you guys do.
Awesome. Thanks, Deirdre. Good to see you, Michael.
Bye, guys.
All right.